Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission meeting for February 11th, 2021. Not 2020 on the slide, but actually 2021. So let's go ahead and proceed. If all of the commissioners would please come online. And I'm going to ask staff as they do that to let the public know how they can participate in comment to the Planning Commission today.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. For members of the public, if you would like to make a public comment, please click the raise lower hand icon on the control panel, and I will notify you when it's your turn to speak. You will have 2 minutes to speak at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Busk. We are now ready to go to roll call. Ms. Rydell, will you be doing the voice roll call today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I will be doing the voice roll call. As you know, we do have our new commission secretary here, but she's just observing today. So I will be still handling all of the commission secretary duties for this meeting. So I will start with the roll call. Chair Schwartz.
Here.
Vice Chair Escobedo.
Here.
Commissioner Bonderson.
Here.
Commissioner Higgins.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
That is everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Rydell, when would it be appropriate to introduce our incoming Planning Commission secretary to everyone who is observing behind the scenes today?
I will leave that up to Mr. Busk. I believe maybe during announcements would be appropriate, but I will defer to Mr. Busk on that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Busk for preliminary matters, requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have none.
Do any announcements and or appeals?
Yes, I would like to announce that we have a new Planning Commission secretary in training, Ms. Jillian Fennessy. And if she can turn on her camera for just a moment, we can introduce her to the Planning Commission.
Welcome, Ms. Fennessy.
Hello. Hi, nice to meet you all.
Do you want to let us know if there is a timeline for the transition and when we'll start to see you more often?
I'm still in training right now. Next week I might be doing some more, or at the next meeting I might be doing some more involvement.
Very good. Well, we'll look forward to your full involvement soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Very good. Back to the commission. We're going to review for consideration and action the January 21st Planning Commission meeting minutes. We have that in our packet. Are there any changes to the January 21st meeting minutes? I don't see any hands raised. Would someone like to make a motion to I'm sorry, did I hear somebody speak?
Yeah, I'll move to approve.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Very good. We have Higgins and Wiscombe. Any discussion on that motion? Very good. All those in favor? Ms. Rydell, would you please come back on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This time we'll begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Bonderson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Escobedo.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge.
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Chair Schwartz.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Now we'll ask Ms. DeBus to come back to see if we have any members of the public who would like to speak to us on items not on our agenda today.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. For the public, if you would like to make a comment on an item not on today's agenda, please click the raise hand icon on the control panel. A red arrow pointed down indicates a raised hand, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. At this time, I do not see anyone who has requested to speak on this item. I will ask Ms. Rydell if we've received any written correspondence.
Thank you, Ms. DeBus, and to the chair and the rest of the commission. We did not receive any written correspondence for any items not on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Commissioners, you're free to turn off your webcams at this time. And we're going to go to our presenters. And before we have staff come back, I think that would be Mr. Baumann from planning. I do want to ask staff if they would like to identify at this time whether we're also going to have a presentation by the applicant, whether it's Mr. Marshall or someone else from the applicant team. And then also please identify the members of the applicant team who will be available to us online or otherwise for questions from the commission.
Yes, Chair Schwartz, Brian Cornell will be doing the applicant presentation, and we have Ken Marshall, Ron Biscaro, and Bob Cunningham available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And I'm going to assume, but let's just identify for everyone. So we have Mr. Kernal, the architect for the applicant, making the presentation. We have Mr. Marshall from DUDEC, and then Mr. Cunningham, I believe, is on deck to answer any landscape architecture questions, if that's correct. So with that, let's start with Mr. Baumann. Mr. Baumann, are you ready to go ahead and start your presentation for us today?
Yes, Chair Schwartz, I am. All right, this is Tony Baumann, Associate Planner in the Community Development Department, and this project is a new medical office building at the corner of Bath and West Junipero Street, 2403 and 2407 Bath, 310 and 314 West Junipero Street are the addresses of the 4 existing lots that comprise the project site. Next slide, please. This is shows the vicinity of the project in the city. It's in the Oak Park neighborhood, adjacent across West Junipero Street from Cottage Hospital. Most of the surrounding land uses in the area are medical offices, and the zoning in the vicinity is OM, office medical zoning. Next slide. So the proposed project is a 2-story, 27,313 square foot medical office building. It's gone to the city council and received a designation as a community benefit project. A medical facility like this is one of the categories of the type of project that can be a community benefit project. The project includes 2 levels of underground parking that takes up most of the site, almost lot line to lot line, with some exceptions for the excavation and the underground parking garage. It includes the demolition of all the existing development, which is all the existing buildings that are currently used as medical offices. Most of the landscaping would be demolished. It would be replaced with the project and new landscaping. And there are 3 very large coast live oak trees on the property that would be preserved. Next slide, please. This is the site plan. It's oriented on our city convention with north to the top. So on the right side, we have Bath Street, and along the bottom of the slide would be West Junipero Street. To the left of the project on the west side is a public alley that goes all the way through the block. Let's see, the white area is the above ground building footprint. The below ground building footprint is more or less on that green color. Those green areas indicate raised planters that are above the parking garage beneath. The building is kind of a U shape with all the parking for the project would come in through the public alley and down a driveway ramp to access the 2 levels of underground parking kind of in the center of the building. And that also allows the interior offices that face that center area above the ramp to have windows in all the offices. Next slide, please. I just skipped all the way to the roof plan. The architect, Mr. Cannell, has the full plan set with all the drawings in his presentation. But this gives you a look of what the building itself would look like looking from above. The tan colored areas, I guess you would call it a mansard roof with mission tile, sloping mission tile around the perimeter. And then flat roof areas, those white spots would be the mechanical roof equipment. And the roof is proposed to have green roof, planted roof areas. The sort of green area on the north side of the building, that piece sticking out to the north is a 1-story component of the building with a flat roof. Next slide, please. So now we'll walk around the elevations. This is the east elevation along Bath Street. The building has a large window area that shows the main entrance for the building. There's a few steps that go down off the sidewalk into the first floor of the building at the main entrance. You can see the site has a little bit of slope with the northeast corner on the right side of the image. The floor level of the first story would be a little bit below existing grade. To the left side of this elevation, we're looking down West Tenipro Street, and then across West Tenipro is, you can see a little edge of the Cottage Hospital Energy Building. All these elevation drawings have that red line showing the 45-foot height limit for the zoning. For the zoning height limit is 45 feet. So this is there to kind of demonstrate that the project is well below the height limit. Next slide, please. So we'll go clockwise around the building. This is the south elevation, the West Tenipro Street elevation. Again, the grade slopes down a little bit. The sandstone walls indicate where the raised planters are proposed. Those sandstone walls are out at the property line at the back of the sidewalk. To the left of the building is the existing public alley. And then across the alley going down West Tenipro Street is just mostly all medical office buildings. That shows the adjacent structure. And the plans themselves, the plan set that you have, I zoomed in a little bit on these elevations so we could see them better on these slides, but there's more context shown for the adjacent buildings in these elevation drawings. So they provide kind of a streetscape view in the plan set. Next slide, please. Continuing on around, this is the west elevation that faces that public alley. To the right of the building on the image, we see West Tenipro Street. And in the center of this building, we see the 2 building facades with the windows. That's kind of the 2 end prongs of that U shape. And in the center is where the cars would enter from the alley and go down the ramp down below into the parking garage. To the left side of the building, we see rendered that really big tree. That's actually, there's 2 trees close together there. Those are the two of the coast live oaks proposed to be kept. And over on that same left side, you can see a sandstone wall with a wooden gate. That's the trash enclosure. And then a ramp, an accessible ramp to enter that door of the building. Next slide. And finally, the north elevation is a view that probably wouldn't be seen that much because it's facing the north toward all the existing medical offices that go north on Bass Street, on that side of Bass Street. And again, you can see how part of the first floor of the building is below existing grade, and the brown fence there indicates the trash enclosure. And in the background, you can see Cottage Hospital. It's about 60 feet tall, that Cottage Hospital building. To the left of this image would be looking down Bass Street. Next slide. So that gave you some orientation, I think, on the project. So the required applications under consideration today are a development plan, front setback modification, and an interior setback modification. Next slide. So I'll go through these one by one. So the project's requesting development plan approval. In terms of development plan, this project has an advantage of starting out with 4 existing lots. So it's allowed minor additions. It's allowed the floor area from the minor addition category of the growth management program of 1,000 square feet per lot, and also 2,000 square feet per lot for small additions. In this chart, you can see that 310 East Junipero Street is showing that number 240. That means it's already used 760 square feet of minor addition in the past. That was conversion of a residential building to a medical office. So that, oh, and also demolition of all the buildings on those 4 lots is 6,958 square feet. So the project already has 18,198 square feet to work with. They're proposing the building to have 27,317 net square feet of floor area. So that difference of 9,119 square feet has been allocated by the City Council from the community benefit category of the growth management program. Next slide. So the findings the Planning Commission should consider for review and approval of a development plan is that the project complies with all applicable zoning ordinance provisions. It's consistent with sound community planning. The project would not result in a significant adverse impact on the community's aesthetics or character, that the size, bulk, and scale are compatible with the neighborhood based on project compatibility criteria. The Architectural Board of Review has provided comments to the commission on the project compatibility criteria, and they've felt that the project meets it, and they give some reasons why in the Architectural Board of Review minutes that are attached to the staff report. And the project needs to be consistent with the city's traffic management strategy. Next slide, please. To describe the front and interior setback modifications, I prepared some slides that kind of illustrate those because it's easier to see with them illustrated for you. So this is the corner of the building, the southwest corner. So this is as if the viewer were standing in West Junipero Street, and West Junipero Street would be heading off toward the right in this image, and the public alley would be heading off to the left. So we're sort of at the intersection of the public alley and West Junipero Street. Next slide, please. So these circles indicate where this entry stair on West Junipero Street encroaches a bit into the front setback. Of course, West Junipero Street has in the office medical zone, has a required 10-foot setback. And the alley side, a public alley, only has an interior setback, and in this zone, it's a setback of 6 feet. So a portion of that accessible ramp to enter on that alley side is in the required setback. Next slide, please. So this shows the site plan view of that southwest corner. And you can see that stair tower element corner of the building that serves both above ground stories and goes all the way down through the 2 levels of underground parking. And the door coming out of there has a landing and steps. And it may be hard to see on the slide, but there's a dashed line that indicates the 10-foot front setback. So next slide, please. This is a zoomed in view. You can see again that corner stair tower element inside the building and, and the landing and steps outside. So the dashed red line down at the bottom of the slide is the property line. That's right at the back of the sidewalk. And then the blue line is the required 10-foot setback from the front lot line. And I put in this green line because the zoning ordinance has a provision that allows an encroachment into a front setback of 3 feet. Well, it's the minimum required by the building code, or 3 feet, whichever is greater. And unfortunately, the building code for a non-residential building like this, it has to have at least a 5-foot landing. That corner element, you can see it's behind the blue line. So that corner of the building is set back about 11 feet from the property line. But even so, given that allowance shown by the green line, it still wasn't enough to accommodate the 5-foot landing outside that door and the 5-foot width of the steps. So I've got circled the portion of the landing and steps that encroaches into the front setback. So hopefully that describes what's happening there with the request for the front setback modification. Now we'll go to the interior setback modification. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. The findings are slightly different for these. So front setback modification, the findings, it's consistent with the general purposes of the title, meaning the zoning ordinance, for the specific purposes of the zoning district. In this case, it helps facilitate a medical office building being proposed in the medical office zone, so it's consistent with that. The modification is necessary to accomplish any one of the following: secure an appropriate improvement on the lot, and staff does feel like this is an appropriate improvement, or prevent an unreasonable hardship due to the physical characteristics of the site or development or other circumstances, etc. In this case, we felt that this situation was applicable to the project. You could see it on the site plan because they are on the opposite of West Junipero Street. The project is kind of set back from the north side to preserve the existing oak trees. And this being a corner site, it does have 2 front setbacks with the 10-foot setback requirement on 2 sides of the property. So that's sort of a physical characteristics or other circumstances. So we believe that finding could be made to support the front setback mod. Next slide. So now we'll go to the interior setbacks. So here we've got that accessible ramp that's adjacent to the public alley. Next slide, please. And I did the same thing here, just kind of diagrammed what's happening with a zoomed in view. So this part of the building also has a stair going upstairs. The door exits out onto an accessible ramp. It has to have the 5-foot width, and given the way the project is configured, the ramp needs to make that hairpin turn, so it's got to be 10 feet as it wraps around that turn. So the ramp is designed at the minimum size required to meet the building code. The property line, and it's kind of an invisible line here because it's paved. The existing situation is pavement on both sides of the property line, but that red dashed line indicates the property line at the edge of the public alley, and then the blue line showing the 6-foot setback. And the ramp, as it's designed, encroaches about 2 feet 2 inches into the setback. This one's a little interesting too, in that the zoning ordinance would allow this encroachment if it were for a landing and steps. It says outside steps or landings, but it doesn't say ramp. So we interpret it to mean that the ordinance didn't allow the encroachment for a ramp, thus the requirement for the setback modification for the ramp. Next slide, please. The findings for the interior setback mod, pretty similar. The modification is consistent with the general purposes of the title or specific purposes of the zone. Here, staff cited the same findings. It's facilitating a medical office building in medical office zone. And the modification is necessary to accomplish securing an appropriate improvement on the lot. And we believe this is an appropriate improvement. Next slide, please. For environmental review, the project qualifies for an exemption under California Environmental Quality Act Section 15332 because it is infill development. And these are the requirements to be exempt under this section for infill development. The project is consistent with the zoning and general plan. The site is less than 5 acres and it's surrounded by urban uses. The site has no value as habitat. This project proposes no significant adverse effects on traffic, noise, air quality, water quality, and the project is adequately served by utilities and public services. And all those things are true. Next slide. The project went to the ABR on July 27th and November 2nd. I've got summarized here the comments from the November 2nd meeting when the ABR continued the project to the Planning Commission. They like the Spanish character of the project. The 2-story project fits in with surrounding buildings, similar in height and size to the surrounding buildings. The project's sensitive to historic resources. In this case, there's a historic resource directly across Bath Street is a building called the Knapp Building. It's a much bigger building, similar in height. Maybe the Knapp Building's a little bit taller than this one. But the size as well as the architectural style were sensitive to that historic resource. The ABR didn't see any issues with the massing that would require story poles. And the project provides appropriate landscaping and open space. Next slide. And the modifications came up late in the game. Unfortunately, we had completed pre-application review team and development application review team reviews of this. And then when I was preparing the staff report for the Planning Commission is when I discovered these 2 setback encroachments that I just described. So the applicant returned to the ABR for the purpose of the ABR commenting on the setback encroachments. And that happened just this past Monday. So this is when I prepared this slide, you know, these were raw draft minutes from the ABR secretary, but I was at the meeting, so I heard them all too. But this summarizes what the ABR had to say. They made a unanimous motion for this and to continue it indefinitely, so it'll come back to the ABR. They were all supportive of the proposed setback modifications for the stair and ramp. And they made a design comment that they would prefer the stair and ramp to minimize the metal railings and maximize the sandstone railing. It's purely a design thing. They just thought it would look better to see more sandstone wall and less metal railing. And they just said they would look forward to landscape plans incorporating the changes. Next slide. So in conclusion, with staff's recommendation, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project, making the findings outlined in Section 8 of the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A of the staff report. So this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Baumann. And before we go to the applicant team, I think I was so eager to welcome Mr. Baumann here today that I may not have read the item into the record. So my apologies. I'm going to back up and take care of this one administrative matter, which is that this is a new item, the application of Kenneth Marshall, Dudek, for Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital Foundation, owner of 2403-2407 Bath Street and 310 to 314 West Junipero Street. So now we can proceed. With that, who's going to be presenting for the applicant team today? Welcome, Mr. Biscaro. Welcome, Mr. Kernal. And it looks like, have you arranged for a 15-minute presentation? Is that the right amount of time?
Yes, that should be fine.
That's sufficient. Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and get started.
Ron, I think you're muted.
I should be unmuted now.
You're good.
Am I good? Okay. Good afternoon again, Chair Schwartz and members of the Planning Commission. I am Ron Biscaro, the VP for Project Management for Cottage Health. And I thank you, Tony, for your comprehensive staff report on our behalf. Cottage is very excited to share our medical office building plan with all of you today. We believe that the project site at the corner of Bath and Junipero Streets is ideally suited for the proposed medical office building due to its proximity, and adjacent to Cottage Hospital. Furthermore, we have the ability to relocate all the occupants of the current buildings to other spaces around our campus to accommodate this very high priority. So our goal with the medical office building is essentially threefold. It's to consolidate all pediatric outpatient services from their current location on the Goleta Valley Cottage Hospital campus. Number two, to expand the number of pediatric specialty physicians serving Santa Barbara and the Tri-County area to accommodate future growth. And lastly, to provide immediate access to hospital-based pediatric services, including our pediatric ICU, neonatal ICU, and pediatric unit. Cottage chose Brian Cornell's firm to develop this project due to his familiarity with the Cottage campus, in that he's been involved in the design of our recently completed facility master plan for many years, as well as his genuine appreciation for Santa Barbara's architectural guidelines. Our charge to Brian and his team was simple: to design a beautiful building compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and place all the parking underground. So now I'd like to turn it over to Brian to review the project and would be available for any questions that may arise later in the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. And I do want to start by saying I'm very, very fortunate here because when I first met Ron out at the site and we talked about the project, it was very clear that their primary interest was making sure that, one, this building was compatible with their precious NAP building across the street, which of course used to be a nursing school and is now offices for Cottage, but also as a transition building into the predominantly one-story neighborhood to the north. You can see the tiny little site plan below of the existing buildings. They're basically, as Tony mentioned, 6,958 square feet. The buildings that are along the streets are all used for office function. And that U-shaped building in the upper left-hand corner is actually what is called Hospitality House. And this is a service that Cottage provides for people who have, oftentimes they are younger patients, and a place where family members can stay over while a child is in the hospital. It's important to note that this function will continue to survive in a beautiful historic building that's on an apartment building on De La Vina, and they'll be increasing the scope of this service. So the first thing I did was to hire Alex Cole to evaluate all of these buildings and make sure that we did not have any historic resource issues. She compiled a historic resources report. We went to HLC and that was all ratified. And then we set out to embark on the design for the building. Next slide. So Tony's done a great job explaining this. Here are some aerial views that give you a little better picture from the air of the parcel that exists today. And you can see the fairly enormous the energy center that is there across the street, but you can also see beyond that the Knapp building and its beautiful Spanish colonial revival character. Next slide. This is just some of the neighborhood shots. You can get a sense again of the buildings that are there today, none of them having any historic consequences. Next slide. So the design is really very simple. It is basically designed to be two efficiently dimensioned wings that will accommodate medical office space. So this idea came up, one, to facilitate the ramp going down into the parking. As Ron mentioned, that was a criteria we were given, and we're very lucky to have been given that criteria because it's going to be very expensive. As we know, there's a lot of rocks in this neighborhood, and I'm sure we'll be taking ones that are the size of small cars or maybe even small trucks out of here. But this allows for the ramp to essentially serve as a separation between those wings, which then allows us to get natural light and air on all sides of these wings that will have medical office. So it really does work well. And then obviously the wings are connected to a central lobby that is a 2-story volume off of Bath. As Tony also mentioned, because of the topography, this courtyard into that lobby is slightly below the level of the sidewalk at Bath. And then you can see we connect back to grade with a ramp down a little bit further. I think Tony has talked about these mods. I will tell you that, you know, as he mentioned, they did come late, and he's blamed himself for that, but frankly, it's really our fault for not noticing in the first place. But we did feel that they were so minor in terms of their impact, particularly given the fact that we're surrounding this whole building on a plinth of sandstone, which we're going to have plenty to work with. And to redesign to eliminate the mods would have just impacted our plans down in the parking structure and in limiting square footage above. Next slide. So this is the parking structure. So we're looking at actually the lowest level in the parking structure. It's 2 levels down. So at the very bottom, you can see how all the stairs do connect up to the building. As well as the elevators. So this is the lowest level. And then the next slide gets us to the intermediate, or I guess the first level from grade. So you can see the 2 ramps, the ramp coming down and then the ramp going back down further. So that you can really see on this plan how we have worked very hard to carve away the footprint of this excavation in order to protect the critical root zone of these 2 oaks. There's a large, massive 2-trunked oak that is there along the north property line, and then of course there's a beautiful oak right there along the Bath Street frontage. So we've manipulated the shape of that to accommodate it. Next slide. So this is again just the first floor plan. We can move up to the second floor. They're really basically simple stacked 2-story plans. And then next slide, if we go to the roof, we can see, as Tony mentioned, we're showing green roof around the mechanical units. We don't need to put this much green roof in from a SWIMP standpoint. We are going to have a couple of tanks that are going to collect rainwater, as well as the green roof up on the roof. And if you're interested in that, we do have the civil drawings that we can show you if you have any questions. Next slide. So Tony went through these elevations. I think we should skip through these quickly and get to the views, which I think will be more telling. But you can see the size of the energy building there on the left compared to our proposed structure. This again, the lower elevation is the alley. Next slide. It's a very simple building, which I think again is in keeping with the character of the Knapp building across the street. And there's a lot of planting along the street trees along Junipero, which is this upper elevation. But you can see in this elevation the plinth of the building, which is that stone wall, which is the raised planters over the top of that parking structure below. Next slide. So this is a section through the ramp, so it really clearly shows how the building functions relative to access there on the left from the alley down the ramp into the first level of parking, and then circulating around that parking down to the lower level. Next slide. Just another section through that parking area below and the building above. Next slide. Showing that gap where the ramp is and how we're able to get natural light and ventilation into the spaces on either side, the two wings. Next slide. So this really starts to give a real sense of the building. You can see the slope of Bath Street here on that east elevation, and what will be a beautiful two-story lobby volume that with the glass facing essentially to the north or northeast. The lower area is just another vantage point closer to the corner of Bath and Junipero. Again, very simple building. You know, we intend on having beautiful rafter tails. The base is kind of extended out to articulate it from the second floor above. Next slide. So the upper view there is really from the corner, and we do have, we show a young tree there, which I'm going to have Bob Cunningham briefly describe the landscape plan in a moment. But this is an opportunity where we, on the corner here, where we do have Mother Earth, so we're going to be able to plant a really beautiful tree there that will grow and prosper over the years. The middle view is the one that Tony used to illustrate those modifications, and I think he did a good job of that. As he mentioned, the ABR thought that these metal rails should probably be stone, and that's fine with us. And then the lower view there illustrates how the building will look from that alleyway. One of the things, if Mr. Bolden, if you could zoom in on that lower one real quickly. One of the things that the ABR asked us to do, and I think it was a good suggestion, and it is the idea that we would announce that vehicular entrance. So you can see that little piece of roof, kind of like a roof covering that creates an element that will allow for signage and clarity for visitors who are using the building. And then obviously the gates to the trash enclosure there in the foreground. Next slide. And here is the landscape plan. So Bob, if you want to jump on and give us a brief description of the concept.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Well, there I am. Okay. Not that that matters. Okay, so Brian referred to the specimen tree on the corner of Junipero and Bath. It's a mimosa tree. We don't have many of them in town. We have a couple of magnificent specimens on Northern Modoc Road at the Lutheran Church. If any of you have been by there, especially in the springtime when those trees are blooming, you can appreciate their size and beauty. We seldom get opportunities to plant trees that large in town because it's a city. But at this location, I think it's going to be a great spot, and it's going to really feature that corner. The remainder of the landscape is essentially meant to complement the building's mass without overwhelming it. The trees that we have, the taller trees, are Stenocarpus or firewheel. upper right-hand corner and lower left-hand corner. We've got 5 of those altogether. The medium-sized trees along Bath Street, and in the upper left-hand corner are Scheffleras or Queensland umbrella trees. We have clusters of windmill palms between the windows against the building. We have Mediterranean fan palms below those at grade above the planter walls. On Bath Street, we're adding Coast Live oak trees as street trees per the street tree designation. And on Junipero Street, jacarandas, again, according to the street tree master plan. As Brian said, we're preserving the big old oak trees on the property, and we have arborists on the team who have taken a careful look at these and written specifications for their preservation. I think they'll be well taken care of, and it will last for quite a long time. That's all I have, unless you've got specific questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. We'll have you be available should there be questions. So thank you for being here today. And Mr. Kernell, do you need a little extra time to wrap up? We could do that if necessary.
Nope, that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll invite you back, Mr. Kernell, as soon as we first ask the commissioners to come online and ask Mr. Busk if there are any members of the public who would like to speak on this item today.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. And for the public, if you wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the GoToWebinar control panel. This indicates to me that you wish to speak. You only need to click the hand icon one time, and a raised hand is indicated by the red arrow pointing down. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and at this time, I do not see that anyone has raised their hand to speak. We'll give it another moment, and while we wait on that, I will ask Ms. Rydell if we've received any written public comment.
Thank you, Ms. DeBusk, and to the chair and the rest of the commission. We did not receive any written correspondence on this item. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much.
And still no public raising their hands, so I don't think we have any public comment on this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Busk and Ms. Rydell. So it's back to the commission for questions of Mr. Baumann on staff or any members of the applicant team. And Commissioner Lodge, you'll go first. When you identify who you'd like to ask the question of, let's pause for a moment to allow them to come back online. I don't know that we need everybody online right now. That is all staff and applicant members, but feel free, however many individuals you'd like to be online for your questions. Go ahead, Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In looking at the plans, it seems as if the building itself is set back significantly more on all 3 sides, that is on the alleyway, on Junipero and Bath, further back than required by the setback. Am I reading the plans correctly? That's for Mr. Kernell.
Yes, Commissioner Lodge, that is correct. It is set back more than it needs to, with the exception of that stair and that ramp.
Well, that ameliorates the issue there considerably, it seems to me.
And I'll tell you honestly, the criteria was simply to meet, this is another criteria that Ron gave me the first day, is just make sure it meets the zoning ordinance relative to parking. So it really came down to getting as many spaces as we could in those 2 levels. And then that determined how much square footage we could put above. And that was the limiting factor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time, Commissioner Lodge, for any members of either team? No. Okay.
No.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Wiscombe, questions, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions, and I'm not sure where they go. most of them are on the conditions of approval, but, which I think is appropriate at this time. Is that right, Madam Chair? Okay, good. First, I wanted to start with the DUDEC letter on page 5, and I'm not sure this is for DUDEC, but it says that approximately 26.3% of the site will be landscaped. Now, the staff report says 21.9. I assume the DUDEC letter is probably the more up-to-date calculation on that. Would that be correct? Because the letter was dated just a week ago. If someone could just answer that question for me. I'm sure Mr. Bauman's report came out, or he prepared it before that. Maybe Mr. Bauman can answer that question. Or maybe no one.
Mr. Bauman, could you rejoin us, please, for Commissioner
sure.
Wiscombe's question? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. I was trying to quickly compare the two, but I'm not really able to compare them so quickly to figure out what the difference was.
Okay, it's about 5%, so that's why I asked the question. It's all right if you can't answer it. I'm just going to assume that your staff report was prepared before, probably prepared before the DUDEC letter came in.
I'm not sure. I mean, this
Okay.
letter was revised a couple of times for different things, mostly at my request, but I'm not
Okay.
sure this number was updated since the original letter.
Okay, fine. That's fine. It was a larger discrepancy than I've seen in the past. Okay. And then, Mr. Bauman, if you'd stay on, okay, on conditions of approval on page, we're on page 1, which is 9 of 46 in our packet, first page of C of A. You reference in B1, you reference a applicant letter by DUDEC dated October 26, 2020. We don't have that letter. Do you not also want to reference the letter that we do have, that the Planning Commission does have, dated February 2nd, 2021?
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so that would be a change.
I think I suggested updates to that letter maybe a couple of times during the course of our review, the latest one being those modifications. So it was
Okay.
things like that, and I'm not sure the entire letter got overhauled each time. It was probably just making item by item updates. As
Okay, but
we
so-
discovered certain things in the letter that needed to be updated, but then the whole letter didn't get updated along with it necessarily.
Okay, so we should be replacing that October letter with the February 2nd, 2021 letter. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And thank you
Okay.
for pointing that out.
Yeah, I'm not, this isn't a gotcha thing. I really went through this C of A this morning and that's where most of my questions came up. I had very few before that, but, okay. And then on page 2, under C, this is 10 of 46. Did I get this right? Yeah. Okay. I just one more correction, Mr. Bauman. I think that down under tree protection measures, it says condition D8 and it should be E8. Because E8 describes the tree protection, not D8.
Okay.
And I'm bringing that up now, just when we actually get to this. And then it talks about on page 4, that's 12 of 46, under D1C. Did I get that right? Page 4. Yeah, D1C. We talked about new street trees and for approval of the Parks and Recreation Commission. Did this have to go through that process since Mr. Cunningham just said that he's using the trees that are the approved street trees in the street tree master plan?
I know during the DART review, we consulted with Nathan Slack, the city
Okay.
urban forest superintendent, and he provided direction on the street trees.
Great, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that that base was covered, and that was accomplished.
We also
okay.
had Mr. Slack consider the tree removals and whether he thought they were being adequately replaced with the landscape plan, and he thought so.
Great,
In his opinion.
okay. Thank you for that. And then I wanted to ask you, in that same section, I think it's that same section. Yeah, you refer to, where does it say that? Tree protection measures reproduced on the grading plan. Where does it say that? Where did I read that?
Page
I
10 of
can't-
46.
Is it page
C1.
10?
C1, design review tree protection measures, is that?
Oh, yes, okay, yes, yeah, reproduced on the grading plan. Thank you, Madam Chair. So that's a pretty wieldy, I assume you're referring to section E8. I just wanted a clarification because that section is so, where is it again, E8?
Yes.
So are there
That's-
certain sections of E8 that you want on the grading plan? Because you don't want this whole thing on there, I don't think, the whole, all of E8, do you? It goes on and on. I would assume you want A and B.
I'm just looking through it.
Yeah. Well, you can look at the
I think-
tree con, if you go to the next page, Mr. Bolton, this covers A and B, and then
Oh,
the
right.
next. Yes, well, storage and, well, maybe that, it's just a lot of information to try to put on a grading plan, which is a pretty technical document anyway, and will be for this project because of the amount of cut, but I don't, Ms. DeBuskus is here.
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Wiscombe, typically what happens is the grading plan would include a separate sheet that identifies the applicable conditions of approval. So it
Okay.
shouldn't.
It'll be fine then, yeah,
plan.
okay, thank you. I looked at that and thought, oh, I wouldn't want to put all that on a grading plan, so, okay, that's great. Okay, and then, okay, and then on the conditions of approval, page 10, E9, why am I getting these wrong here? No, I got the wrong page here. Hold on here. I'm sorry. I apologize for. Oh, I'm looking at page 18 of 46. Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm on page 18 of 46. It's page 10 in the conditions of approval. It talks in number 9, excuse me, in about the middle of the paragraph, it talks about, as such, to protect tree number 1, all ground disturbance related to work within the critical root zone shall be conducted by hand to a depth of 3 feet. That's the same thing that the DUDEC letter says, dated February 2nd, 2021, but it only refers to tree number 1, where the DUDEC letter seems to say that not only the 2 oaks that are together, but the 1 oak that's out on Bath Street will be handled in the same way. So I just wanted clarification if it's only tree number 1, which I assume is tree number 1 and 2. Yes, Mr. Cornell.
The tree number 1, which is the large oak, is the more critical one, where the walls, it's obviously the larger tree and the walls are coming fairly close to the critical root zone. So that was the tree that I think the arborist was most, and the landscape architect for that matter, was most interested in making sure that we were being very careful in protecting it. I don't think it is as critical, or because we're not as close, on the tree at the street, it's not as critical. So I think that's why they identified that tree.
Okay, so it's really though, they're kind of together, aren't they? Tree 1 and tree 2? I didn't look at the labeling on them, but those
Well,
two.
yeah, I don't know if I can answer that question, to be honest with you. It's very possible that tree 1 and 2 are identifying the double trunked oak along the north
Right.
property line.
Okay. Yeah, I assume that because it says three oak trees. So yeah.
So that would
Okay.
be-
Okay, that's fine. That answer is fine. And then, Mr. Cornell, if you come back for just one sec, because I have one more question for you. This was I didn't catch this on your plans, but you have a 1-story part to this project, right?
Yes,
And that's on the north side, right?
correct.
And what is so why is that 1 story? I'm just curious. Is it neighborhood
kind of goes
compatibility?
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, it kind of gets back to just the way the building configured after we figured out the parking, because form follows parking. And we did have extra square footage that it seemed made sense. After we had kind of the rational extrusion of 2 stories, it made sense to have that 1-story portion that then would transition to that 1-story building to the north. So that's really the reasoning.
Okay, thank you for that. Until Mr. Bauman mentioned it, I missed it, and I thought it must be neighborhood compatibility, but that's a nice, it's a nice transition, I think. So,
Yeah.
Okay, great. And my last question is just on page 20 of 46. Which is page 12 of the C of A. And I'm just curious, and maybe Mr. Marshall can answer this, or I was curious, given the age of the existing buildings, has any asbestos investigation been done yet? There's the section 11 on asbestos.
Hi, this is
Hi, Mr. Biscar, how are you?
good. Good. Thank you very much for your question. Actually, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good,
Thank
good.
you.
We have not done any investigations of these buildings yet for asbestos. It's very common to do that, prior to the beginning of construction. And since they're all occupied right now, we didn't really want to disrupt the occupants, clinicians, and other folks, doctors who work in these buildings until we need to. So at some point, once we relocate everyone, we can do that assessment fairly quickly with the proper noticing.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for that. I figured that was probably the answer. Sometimes it's obviously, given the age of these buildings, it's invasive to do asbestos investigation. You have to scrape, window frames and all sorts of things. So, okay. Thank you for that. And Madam Chair, that completes my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Commissioner Bonderson, questions for staff and/or the applicant team?
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to start with Mr. Cunningham and Mr. Bolton, if you'd be kind enough to put on the very colorful landscape plan that was used at the end of Mr. Cunningham's presentation. I didn't catch the page number. That's got it. You got it. Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Cunningham.
Hello.
I was curious to know a little bit more about the choices of landscape and which plants. I want to confirm first that the only plants that will be remaining after the demolition and removal of existing site conditions is going to be those 3 oak trees. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So the introduction of the different plants that you spoke about, those are all new.
That's correct.
My understanding. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I had a good starting point. So I was curious to understand what was the process, and perhaps you can share with us how you came about choosing the plantings that you did choose. In particular, I'm curious about, if I recall, you said mimosa, you said jacaranda, and a couple other very flowery and colorful plantings. What was your thought behind that?
Interesting question. We provided the landscape design for the Knapp building, the Knapp parking garage, the Pueblo parking garage, and the main campus of Cottage Hospital, trying to be compatible with those. It's, in my opinion, we were, or I should say I was, trying to be compatible with the Spanish colonial revival design of the building. I think all of these plants are suitable for traditional architecture, and they are all Mediterranean drought-tolerant plants. You may have noticed we were only adding a couple of native oaks. The rest of the plant palette is non-native. It's and that decision was made and has been made for quite a long time, in the context of knowledge that most of our maintenance gardening services in Santa Barbara are much more adept to taking care of non-native materials. Natives have special requirements that are difficult to maintain in commercial context. So that is essentially it. I'm not sure if I've answered your question that well. It's basically what came out of my brain in the context of what we've been doing in this location for the past now 18 years. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir, it does. And there's no judgment or criticism on your brain. I was just interested in knowing a bit more about the context, perhaps. When I went to do the site visit, I didn't have this information, so I wasn't looking. But I am particularly curious about the mimosa and the jacaranda, because I'm personally very knowledgeable about mimosa plants. Believe it or not, we don't have a lot of them here, but they're usually considered, invasive or very messy plants, and they shade so well that they often prohibit underplanting to thrive. And that was the first thing that, went off in my head when I heard you say it, as well as jacarandas just being a bit of a moisture, it requires a lot of moisture to thrive, and then it's very messy when it drops its leaves or its blossom. I was curious to know, had you given any thought to more drought tolerant, low water landscaping, even though it may or may not actually blend in with the existing neighborhood, if you would have considered at all sort of doing this evolution towards less need of water?
Well, in regard to the jacarandas, those are the designated street tree for Junipero. And I do know that they are more drought tolerant than most people would think. I agree, they are messy. We try with Cottage Hospital properties to avoid a lot of flower drop and fruit drop and so on. As I said, these are the designated street trees. There are several, specimens all the way down Junipero, and personally, I love the tree. I would not want to go back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee and ask for a change, a co-designation in that particular location. With regard to the mimosa, it's a very drought tolerant tree. It does have flower drop and seed pod drop during a couple of periods of the year. However, the flowers are not the sticky, slippery kind that you get with the jacaranda. I don't think that will be a maintenance issue. Again, all of the plants on the plant palette, with I would say probably the exception of the jacaranda, do meet the water-wise requirements that the city has.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you covering that with us. And I understand that these kinds of plants are very attractive. They're some of my favorites, but they are messy, and wanted to know a little bit more about your thoughts behind it. I appreciate your explanation. And my next question will go, I believe, actually, we can stay right here. Mr. Bolton, do you mind zooming in? I just have a personal curiosity. I couldn't find this in our plan set, where the stairs come out into the setback on the lower left-hand corner of the plan set. Mr. Cunningham, what do you have proposed here?
Those two trees are firewheel trees. They will, they're slow growing, but they get to be quite large over time. They'll get to be 40 feet tall. We have a few very mature specimens on, I think, the 100 block of West Arriaga Street. They do quite well in confined spaces, and they're an attractive evergreen tree. The other trees, I think, in that location, although they're not called out on the plan, and I've probably forgotten what they are, but I believe there are some Australian Dracaenas, Cordyline australis, that will provide some height against the building. But we're relying on the firewheel trees to do the most of the heavy lifting with regard to buffering the mass of the tree, if you will, or not the tree, the building.
With my knowledge of that tree, it's probably going to be somewhat of a visual protector of the stairs as well. The stairs aren't going to be so very good. It's exactly what I wanted to know. Thank you. My following question will most likely be best for Mr. Cornell. Hello, Mr. Cornell. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I had just one curiosity. I did not see it in the package, and I wanted to double check that I didn't miss something. Is there any solar
Yes, solar panels, photovoltaics, yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
that's going
we
on in
do
this building?
show, Mr. Bolden, if you could go to the roof plan, which right there, yeah. So we are showing discrete, quite a few panels actually, but we've sort of discreetly hidden them into the mansard that's in that vehicular passageway.
Wonderful. And would you be kind enough to share with us just a little bit further how much it is expected to collect and how it's going to serve? Does it exclusively serve the building, and how will it do that?
Yeah, it'll exclusively serve the building. I mean, we're not anticipating putting these panels on battery or anything. So it will basically go directly into the grid and help the meter run in reverse during the day and reduce energy costs, hopefully significantly. As you can see, I don't know what that count is, but that's actually quite a few panels. It'll generate a good amount of electricity.
I'm very pleased to hear that. And is there any outdoor space that will be accessible for the people using the building on the roof for any, I don't know,
No, we're not. We're really the green roof that is on the roof right now. I mean, obviously the one that is on that one-story portion that you see in the upper portion of the screen, that's going to be nice because the windows from the second floor will look out onto that. Unfortunately, the upper roof is really just to meet stormwater requirements, and the civil drawings show, I mean, there's really not a lot of area that's required. And at the end of the day, we may, avoid putting the green roof up there if we can make the calculations work, just because you do like it to be an amenity if it can be, and not just up there, not being seen. But no, we do not have roof access. Other than what's necessary for the mechanical equipment.
Excellent. I appreciate the answer because it clarifies what I was looking for. Madam Chair, that concludes my questions. Now I might have something else come up in a moment, and I'll pop back in.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonderson. Who would like to go next with questions of staff and the applicant team? Which commissioner would like to come on and do that? I'm going to wait a moment. I don't know if we're having any technical difficulties today. Ms. DeBusk, do you know if any of the commissioners are having technical difficulties?
Madam Chair, it does not appear so.
Okay. Vice Chair Escobedo, any questions for staff and the applicant team?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to pop on to say that I don't have questions at the moment.
Okay, okay. Kind of a quiet day for this commission. Let me just find out. Commissioner Reed, any questions? I'm guessing not. I don't see you, but let me just check in with you.
Chair Schwartz, nope, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Let's see. I think then Commissioner Higgins, any questions for staff or the applicant team?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. I guess then I'm up. I'll go to my questions. I just have a few. First, I'd like to ask perhaps of Mr. Biscaro. So go ahead, Mr. Bauman. You can turn off your webcam if you like. Mr. Biscaro, and then let me ask Mr. Bolton to please put up, this is page 15 of 46 in our package. These are the conditions of approval. Construction parking, number 7, construction parking. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. And in this area, Mr. Biscaro, I'd like to ask you, which I don't see here, if there's going to be some sort of a monitoring process by cottage, similar to when you had your master redevelopment plan, either by a cottage employee or some third party, with a hotline, a complaint hotline available for neighbors and a reporting back to the city, again, mirroring what we put in place with you on the master redevelopment plan.
Yeah, Chair Schwartz, we will mandate per the conditions of approval offsite parking. That's worked extraordinarily well to mitigating neighborhood issues for the past 15 to 17 years as we built the new cottage hospital. We will do the same here. The level of workforce will not be near as much at any given time, but I think we'll use one of the shopping centers perhaps, and then shuttle people back and forth. Our department in project management takes an active role in every project, and Scott Allen is one of my colleagues on the call now if you need to talk to him. But we monitor that ourselves. We have very good compliance. We have had no major issues with contractors parking, and we will keep the hotline in place. It is still in place. It is still there now. Even though for the most part we finished our replacement project, we still have some ongoing structural projects that we're doing for the Pueblo Pavilion now and later the Bath Pavilion. So we certainly give anyone on our website access to our department or to administration for any issues they may have. So I don't foresee an issue here.
Well, let me ask you then, thank you for that, Mr. Biscaro. The complaint hotline, and I'm going to ask my colleagues to consider supporting me on incorporating that into this section of the conditions of approval. I would like to see that hotline identified.
Sure.
You know, it worked so well, and I think if you would agree with me, Mr. Biscaro, it not only expressed to the community the diligence and the seriousness both of the city with Cottage in ensuring as few neighborhood disruptions and inconveniences as possible. And this was certainly one method of doing that. And you were responsive and you came back to Planning Commission. We've seen you over the years, but I think this could go a long way if you would be willing to do that.
Absolutely fine by us.
Okay, so staff, if you would make a note, I'm going to make a note that I'd like actually the specific phone number, that is the complaint hotline, incorporated into this section of the conditions of approval. Very good. And then my next question is on page 35 of 46 in our package. This is this the due-deck letter? Yes, this is the February 2nd due-deck letter. And I don't know if this is, well, either to Mr. Biscaro or Mr. Kernal. This is kind of a light question, but it piqued my interest. The existing enclosed garage on Pueblo, I was curious about the capacity there now, such that you are feeling a need to build a brand new, 2-level underground garage under the new development. Or have you maxed out most days in the existing garage? Is that why?
I would say we actually underparked our facility master plan from the very beginning because of the incentives that we provided to employees to carpool and ride motorcycles and bikes, etc. At times, certainly the employee parking lot is always full, and it's difficult to maintain enough parking. And we titrate our employees between the NAP parking structure, which is behind the NAP building, which is about 600 cars, with the other parking structure, which is for physicians and the general public. So for the most part, the Pueblo parking structure, which includes general public parking, is mostly full most of the time. And it's also very inconvenient, I think, relative to this building, to have parking, basically 2 blocks away and then shuttle people back and forth. So as Brian indicated in his presentation, one thing that we did, if I might, over at Bella Riviera, when we built that workforce housing project, we parked it to code, and we learned from that, and that's worked very well in the neighborhood, and people comply with that. So we feel that by parking to code here for whatever square footage we build, we mitigate neighborhood issues and people parking on the street. And so I think overall our parking is quite thin for the whole campus right now. We wish we would have had more, but we complied with the city's conditions. So basically, since we're building a nascent building, we want to make sure it's parked adequately per code.
Okay, very good.
Thank
you for that. Thank you. Mr. Kernal, I have a question for you from the Architectural Board of Review meeting minutes. These are the November 2nd meeting minutes. In our package, it's page 43 of 46. And I'm just curious, any comments you might have, Mr. Kernal. At the very bottom of the motion, this is number 3, the board looks forward to the refinement of the project. I don't know if I'm missing something. Are there any significant refinements that you anticipate would be forthcoming or required to move forward for approval? Or is that more of a generic kind of statement as a closing statement in the motion?
I think it is the latter, Chair Schwartz. They were very pleased with the building, and I think they were just saying here that they're looking forward to, being able to see the details and refinement of it. We are intending to go back immediately to the ABR for project design approval. I believe right now we're trying to get scheduled for the 22nd, so that'll just be in a week and a half. So that, at that point, we expect to get project design approval. I think they will probably identify at that time particular details they're interested in. We actually have already made the change to the stairs that they requested that we're getting the modification for today. I'm being presumptuous, but you understand what I'm saying. And
yes.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape to move forward. We will go back to them probably at least twice as we're developing the design for in-progress review, just to make sure that final approval is as smooth as possible.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And then if you would stay on, Mr. Kernal, my last question, I think, well, to you or Mr. Bauman, and I'll just ask you this. This is the last page of our package, 46 of 46. And this is the applicable general plan policies before us. So this is the circulation element I'm interested in. If we go to the very bottom of this page, Mr. Bauman, Mr. Bolton, we have 5.53 and 5.7.1. And I would just ask you to please review with me the sidewalk improvements that are required and that you have on the plans that comply with these 2 aspects of the circulation element. With this being a pediatric oriented and family oriented facility, I just want to kind of confirm my understanding of what improvements we're making or you're making that will really facilitate that and comply with this element?
Well, as far as within the right of way, Chair Schwartz, we will just simply be replacing sidewalks that Public Works directs us to. And I don't have a recollection of whether they have identified any specific portions that require replacement, but I anticipate usually there are because of tree roots and that kind of a thing. Otherwise, the building is completely accessible. And that's actually one of the reasons for the ramp that's there alongside the alley, is to provide an accessible path of travel to the trash enclosure. We will basically follow Public Works direction on what they require relative to the improvements within the right of way, but we're not planning any changes to that right of way at this point.
Okay. So it's just, again, thinking of the particular client or customer that you're serving with this. And we're thinking of families and children. And, in this section, there's reference to strollers and wheelchairs, walkers, and so forth. And so I just wanted to put this on the radar and see if there was anything you'd like to call out for me in that regard. I think that's it for my questions. So I'll just wait a moment to see if any of the commissioners have follow-on questions. And if not, I think we're ready for deliberations. So let's just recap what we have before us in terms of our decision-making. We have 3 required applications. We have a development plan, front setback modification, and an interior setback modification before us today. So any commissioners, please, not any, but all of the commissioners, please come online and let's begin to comment as we move towards hopefully what will be someone willing to make a motion. Commissioner Lodge, were you on first? Would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a very well done project, and they've thoughtfully fitted into the neighborhood, and it's a very attractive design. And I don't have any problem approving the modifications, partly because the building itself is set back further than is required, so that there is less, in a way, it's less of an intrusion than it might have been if the buildings had been right at the setback line. So I would be happy to make a motion to make the findings and concur with the staff recommendation.
And Commissioner Lodge, if I might ask you, and this will be the same to the rest of my colleagues, if you would be supportive of incorporating, again, on page 15 of 46 in our package, conditions of approval under construction parking, the identification of the complaint hotline with the hotline number. Is that okay with you?
Of course, and it reminds me that I had a little change to the conditions that I'd like to suggest as well. Page 15 of 46.
Okay.
Section 8A, the second paragraph, the last sentence says, this training shall include information on the location and marking of protected trees, the necessity of preventing damage, and the discussion of work practices that will accomplish such. I suggest that such be replaced, that will accomplish the required protection. Staff agrees that that would be an appropriate clarification.
Okay, so instead of such, you're suggesting strike such, and so that will accomplish the required protections. Protection, singular, plural, doesn't matter to you? Protections,
Protection.
plural?
Either way, it's
okay, let's do plural for the moment. Okay, I'm going to make a note of that. Is that the only other change you'd like to see, you'd like to offer in the conditions of approval, Commissioner Lodge?
Thank you.
Okay, very good. I'm going to flag that so that we can incorporate that as well. Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Okay, let's go right on. Commissioner Wiscombe, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Commissioner Lodge's replacing the word such with required protections. I would also like to suggest that on page 1 of the conditions of approval, we update the date of the DUDEC letter to February 2nd, 2021 from that October date that's referenced there, since the Planning Commission is considering the letter of February 2nd, 2021. Just the correction on page 2 of the conditions of approval to reference section E8 and not D8. Those are the only things that I have. In addition to that, I want to just say that I agree with Commissioner Lodge. I think this is a really nice project, great benefit to the community. Cottage Hospital just does an amazing job and amazing work, and I think this is going to be a true benefit. And I wanted to just say that the architecture of the building with the landscaping, I think the landscaping is so complementary to the architecture of the building, and I think it's just going to be a very great project aesthetically. And I don't have any problem seconding Commissioner Lodge's motion when she makes it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, no pressure, Commissioner Lodge. Just note that, okay. If you don't mind, can I go right down the line? Vice Chair Escobedo, are you comfortable going next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will concur with both Commissioner Lodge and Wiscombe. This is an excellent project. And I don't have much to say about it. I think this is, if I were going to grade it as it is currently, I would say an A-. I think the only thing that I wish we saw, and the city's already kind of moving on this with the REACH codes, is I saw in the plans that this project is abandoning old natural gas infrastructure and then putting in new natural gas infrastructure. So if this project was all electric, I would give it an A+. But other than that, I have nothing to complain about on this project, and look forward to seeing it. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with all 3 edits. So yours, Madam Chair, Commissioner Lodge, and Commissioner Wiscombe.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we have an A-. We'll see how we're doing on the report card as we go down the line. Okay, Commissioner Bonderson, are you comfortable going next?
Of course, thank you, Chair Schwartz. I would like to just start by agreeing with so many of the comments that were made. I personally feel that this is a wonderful community benefit as well, and it's going to be a positive addition to the cottage facility and a complement to the neighborhood. In fact, although I expressed certain concerns about the landscaping, I personally love those choices of plants, and although they are messy, they are beautiful, and if that is what's compatible with the neighborhood, then I'm all for it. I'd love to just drive by and take a look at it and go stand under it and enjoy it. But that being said, I want to just express that I'm personally very pleased with the architectural design. I have absolutely no problem at all supporting modifications when they come in this format, because there's so many other solutions that are being proposed in a project like this. I love the fact that there's additional setback. I love the scale. It just fits really beautifully into our community. And therefore, I will just end by saying I agree with the 3 additional comments that have been added to the motion. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonderson. Commissioner Reed, deliberations or comments on what's before us today?
Yeah, Chair Schwartz, I think it's great community project, simple building, complements the Knapp building really well. As Mr. Kernal pointed out, I think that was appropriate inspiration. I would support all the commissioners' comments and adjustments, and I think we should move this forward. I can make all the findings.
Thank you. Commissioner Higgins, comments, please.
I'm on board, so no further comments or questions or compliments necessary. Everybody's covered it. And I can make a motion if you like, Madam Chair, to make findings and include all those conditions, the 3 changes referenced, if you like.
Okay, if you'll just hold on one moment, I'm going to go ahead and just make a few comments, and then I think we'll be ready for a motion. So I too will be able to support the required applications. These are the discretionary land use applications I already identified. I agree with all of my colleagues' complimentary comments, and I would like to make a couple of additional comments from information in our packet. And the first is, and I'm going to the February 2nd DUDEC letter, and it's on the last page of their letter. Mr. Bolton, you don't have to bring this up, but it's under the section entitled Justification for the Project. And I'm so pleased that these sorts of medical and healthcare services are going to be brought forward. We need this type of specialized medical care for children and families. And that is the aim of this development in terms of the cottage health system expansion. So very pleased to see it for that reason. And then also in the DUDEC letter, again, no need to pull this up, but I'm just going to reference that on page 3 of the DUDEC letter, there's some narrative on each of the 4 properties, or about each of the 4 properties. And it was of interest to me that we have original construction from 1912, 1927, 1930, and sort of the chronology of the various uses for the original buildings. And what comes to mind for me is the importance of allowing ourselves, our zoning, our policies, our project decision-making to be flexible enough so that as our community's needs evolve, we have the right policy tools to support and allow for that evolution. As we see in this chronology in the DUDEC letter, they started as residential, and Commissioner Lodge and I have talked a number of times over the years and have made decisions where we're reluctant sometimes, right, Commissioner Lodge, to convert residential to non-residential. However, in this neighborhood, for these purposes, for our community support that we need, this makes sense. So we don't want to constrain ourselves in any way when it's the right thing to do for the community and into the future, well beyond our needs. So it just struck me as that, and we've talked so much about zoning and zoning flexibility, and this just was a highlight for me of how I think we continue to make prudent decisions in terms of zoning flexibility for what we can and cannot foresee into the future for our community. So with that, I'm now ready to hear a motion. If Commissioner Higgins, if you would like to jump in and make that motion, you were enthusiastic about that. So I
Madam Chair,
yes.
if I may interrupt, Commissioner Lodge spoke first and she said she wanted to make the motion.
Would you
so
like to do that, Commissioner Lodge? I didn't hear you say you wanted to make that, but I'm happy to come back around. I apologize.
No, that's quite all right. I don't have ownership of making the motion.
No, it's not that, but if you'd like to, and then let's also, whoever would like to make the motion, let's go back to the conditions of approval, just to recap what we've said we would like to be revised. So would you like to do that, Commissioner Lodge?
Well, I would probably need to refer to you, or I was more generally going to say the changes are made. Yeah, I move that the Planning Commission make the findings and make the necessary findings and concur with the staff recommendation to approve the project and grant the modifications and make the changes to the conditions of approval as mentioned by Commissioner Schwartz, Liscombe, and myself. And the first one was about the phone number for the complaint line. Ms. Wiscombe was the correct date on the letter and the correct labeling of section E8, was it? And there was a third one.
And you had one, Commissioner Lodge. This is on page 7 of 14 in the conditions. This is 8A, the
that's
very
actually on
last sentence.
Yeah, changing such to the
Should I go
the
ahead and read that? Would that be helpful?
protection.
Yes, this is under tree protection, the very last sentence, which would end of work practices that will accomplish, strike the word such and say the required protections. Is that right, Commissioner Lodge?
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, so it's those, if staff got that, if not, I can go back over them. Those are the revisions I think we're all agreeing to in the conditions of approval. So that's the motion. Do
Second.
we have a second? Okay, Commissioner Higgins, thank you. Any discussion on that motion?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Higgins?
Just to make sure I heard it or didn't hear it, did that include the development plan findings too?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said, Mr. Higgins, Commissioner Higgins.
I just want to make sure the motion was to make the findings in the development plan approval too. I
Yes.
don't think I heard that.
Yeah, so it's all three of the required applications: development plan, front setback modification, interior setback modification. Did we get
Okay.
that right, Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
No
Yeah,
question.
so that's okay. Any discussion or questions on the motion? I think we've got it clarified. No. Okay, very good. Ms. Rydell, would you please come online and take a voice vote on that motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will begin the voice roll call vote. We'll start with Vice Chair Escobedo.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Bonderson,
Yes.
Chair Schwartz.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Very good. And the commission's decision today is appealable in 10 days. Is there anything else from staff or any other representative who would like to comment on this? But we have the appeal process handily in front of us. It is the 10 calendar days. And with that, Mr. Kernal, we see you come online.
I just wanted to thank you all. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks to staff and Mr. Biscaro.
And again, Chair Schwartz, members of the commission, Cottage is deeply appreciative of your support and thank you for our discussion today. Grateful.
And thank you for being such a great community member and partner with the city, Mr. Biscaro. With that, this item is concluded. Thanks to everyone. And now let's go to our administrative agenda. So if you'd remain online, everyone. And this is our committee and liaison reports. Do we have any reports today? Commissioner Reed, please.
Yeah, I had a downtown parking hearing this morning, actually. Not a lot to report on, but they went over license plate recognition and the new automated parking policies that will take effect in the coming years. I think they're looking to completely phase in automated parking and kiosks by 2023. and so I asked they allowed me to ask a question, and they answered it. And I was just curious in the context of the 24/7 resident parking permits that were presented to us when we did the AUD amendments. The 24/7 permits really aren't fully functional or feasible until they automate the system. And there's a lot, I didn't really get the details, I need to follow up with them, but there's a lot in this automation that really could incentivize more 24/7 permits. I think to date, they actually have 3 people who have already signed up for a 24/7 residential permit. So I suppose that's encouraging that there's some demand. Not sure how this really relates to our cause on Planning Commission, but I found this interesting. They, we have our 75-minute free parking that we hold so near and dear. When everything becomes automated, so currently there's no way to enforce what is in our municipal code, but you technically are not allowed to go from one lot with 75 minutes free and then receive an additional 75 minutes free in the same day at another lot. But as long as we have an unautomated system, we can't enforce that. Now we will. So it'll be able to track that, and you will not be able to take advantage of what we're currently taking advantage of. Kind of interesting. How that plays into a 24/7 permit, either positively or negatively, I'm not sure, but that was just a fun little fact that I hadn't previously recognized. And that's about it for downtown parking.
You recall, Commissioner Reed, which lots the 324/7? Did I miss you identifying that? Or?
Oh, good question. I would imagine those are tied to a particular lot. I didn't get that information, but I'll follow up on that. That'd be interesting. Because they're not, as we all know, they're not available in all lots.
Right. I recall that Mr. Dayton identified, but now I'm not remembering the 3. I think there are 3 lots. And then my one other question to you is, was there any mention of how the 24/7 permits will be marketed? Kind of pushed out to the community for any kind of robust, cultivation or marketing of them?
They were just being gracious to me because I noted that I wanted to give feedback to the Planning Commission this afternoon. They actually didn't address 24/7 permits except in response to my question. So I didn't want to take up too much of their time. But that'd be it'd be great. I'm sure Mr. Dayton would love to send the commission correspondence on that. He's pretty proud of it, as he should be.
Okay. Well, it'd be great to receive it if you want to be our liaison on having that come to us. Okay. Other reports? Anything at all? Fun facts. Commissioner Reed started off with some fun facts. Any other fun facts? We could start our own fun facts page. Vice Chair Escobedo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to come up with a fun fact before I'm done with my report. Commissioner Reed and myself, we had a FAR meeting on the 8th, and this is one of the last meetings before the public process begins, which they anticipate the start date to be on the 18th or 19th. And we got a peek at the tool that's going to be used for the public process. And I got to say, I am really, really impressed. The tool that they are using is so dynamic. It is compatible on a desktop and on your smartphone. So if you wanted to go around the city and put pins in different neighborhoods and talk about what you think would be appropriate in terms of an FAR, you can do that. One of the more impressive piece is FAR is a really, it can be conceptually pretty complicated. And the education piece that Ms. Metzger, Mr. Gollett, and Mr. Bolton incorporated into it so that someone who maybe is unfamiliar with FAR can grasp the concept and kind of relate it to real life examples was so impressive. I'm really excited for the community to see this. I'm also really excited about this tool and the possibility of using it for other work efforts. And I look forward to hearing your feedback when you actually get to see it on what you thought about it, because I was quite impressed. And so, yeah, and that's it. I couldn't think of a fun fact. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Well, now that's really kind of a tease. When do you think something's going to come to us, Vice Chair Escobedo?
I imagine that we will hear about it leading up. They are going to do messaging out to all of the design review bodies as well as Planning Commission to try and get as much participation in the public outreach effort. It's really exciting, to be honest, and I imagine that in the next week or so that we should be receiving some communications about it.
Okay, great. Look forward to that. Any other reports? Commissioner Higgins, please.
Madam Chair, I don't have a report. I have a question, but my fun fact is that so far we've all been well behaved enough to keep Ms. Ostringer off the TV here. So we'll see if we can make it through. I was just curious if, without engendering Ms. Ostringer or bothering her, can you tell us if there's been any progress with staff to reestablish lunch meetings?
Why don't we, well, Vice Chair Escobedo and I did have a meeting with Ms. DeBusk. Maybe we could ask her to come online if there is anything to report in the way of interim progress.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Higgins. Essentially, at this point, we have decided that lunch meeting items that we would have held, we're going to bring to the full board. So, for example, as a teaser for next week, we have a training on conditional use permits. So normally we would have done that during lunch, but we had an empty meeting and thought it would be a good time, a good way to have a training. The lunch meetings are just difficult with this format. It requires separate logins and GoToWebinars. And so at this point, we haven't found a good way to make that happen.
Thank you.
Hopefully, if we all keep doing our parts and vaccinations keep rolling out, we'll be able to recongregate sometime this year. I'm very hopeful for that. Thank you for following up and asking about that, Commissioner Higgins. Now, because we're going to fold in lunch meetings or lunch topics, typical lunch topics into our public, 1 p.m. hearings, Commissioner Higgins, it doesn't mean that anybody can go off the rails and then trigger Assistant City Attorney Ostringer to come and reel us back in. So I'm just putting you on notice. You want the lunch meetings and we're going to have the trainings, but we still have to behave ourselves. Okay. So on that note, so I don't think, do we have anything else? Commissioner Wiscombe, did I see you poised to raise your hand? No. Okay. That really concludes our business today. Thanks to everybody. We're giving back the rest of the afternoon to all of us and to the public and staff. So with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thanks to everybody. Please stay safe and stay well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.